Hello and welcome to all our friends from all over the world. I'm glad to be here with you once again. I'm Roy Platon, Chief Community Officer and co founder of Acad Asia. Acad Asia is a Singapore based, mission driven edtech business, and we're here to empower educators everywhere. And I'm so glad to see all of you here joining us for our session today. It's been a while. I know we've missed each other. I know I've missed all of you. I hope wherever you are in the world, at whatever time zone you're in, good morning, good evening, good day to all of you. Um, so I just want to do some shout outs, obviously, before we start our webinar Wednesday session. We always have this session on a regular basis. And for this month of September, we're kicking things off with a very exciting topic. Okay, so we have our friends, obviously, from our friends from the Philippines, all over the regions. Uh, Miss Lalaine, if you're watching, it's Acad Asia. Okay, just so that we know that what organization we're in. This is Acad Asia Webinar Wednesdays. We have our friends from Negros Occidental in the Philippines, Taguig City, Sultan Kudarat, Montalban, Rizal. Oh, we even have some friends from Phnom Penh in Cambodia. Hello, Susan. I guess you're a teacher in Phnom Penh. I hope everything is good there. We have our friends from Taytay Rizal. We have our friends from Pampanga, Binyan, Laguna. We also have some friends from Singapore, uh, Kabuyao, and of course our friends from the other regions, maybe Thailand, Sawadikap, Sawadika, from our Indonesian friends, Terima kasih. Thank you for joining us today. And to all of you, a wonderful day to all of you. Oh, Riza J from Taiwan, hello. Rahul, hello from Singapore as well. Oh, we have here, Jason Yogawin from Jakarta, Terima kasih. We have Nikita from India. This is fantastic. Oh, Irfan from Kashmir. Okay, this is fantastic. Okay, we have really a multinational audience with us today. So, as you know, when we have webinar Wednesdays, basically we try to showcase some topics and some discussions about various critical issues that we think are very important for educators to have a venue to discuss. And as you know, we are this is a fireside chat. It's basically very informal. So if you're having your snacks or your merienda or your coffee or tea, or if you're just having dinner, just sit back and relax and enjoy your meal and your drinks while you listen to us discuss about the topic today. So as you know, today is very interesting because we're talking about the flipped classroom. And the flipped classroom is actually not something that is that new. It's been around for quite a while. However, compared to probably more traditional educational models, wherein the teacher is typically the focus of the classroom. So as you imagine, you're standing in front of your class as we're going back to face to face. Usually it's the teacher that's presenting all the information to the students and trying to compress as much educational content and topics as much as possible of the lesson in that short span of time you're in the classroom with your students. So right, and sometimes the time is just not enough to get all the learning outcomes done within that short period that you have them and you have their attention. The engagement can be a little bit limiting because of the time constraints, and sometimes you have to do some work independently during the lesson, or sometimes you have to kind of catch up with some past activities. So it's really very challenging in terms of the traditional education model. Okay, so what we try to do now is teachers, they what we want to do is to strive to make the learning process more engaging for our learners. And one way to do that is the flipped classroom approach. Okay, and maybe some of you have heard this before. Maybe you need a refresher what it means, but today we'll be inviting our panelists to kind of discuss a little bit more and shed some light on it, and probably share with us, has it really worked for them? This flipped classroom approach, has it really worked in their learning settings, in their educational settings, and is it really very helpful? And we can dive deeper and learn more about it. And they'll share probably the pros and cons, the highs and lows of flipping the classroom. And as always, for our session today, There's an accompanying course that goes with our webinar. So if you would like to get your digital CPD credentials or e-certificate on the blockchain by attending and completing this course, just go to acadasia.com, enroll in the accompanying course, which I'll share with you later, so that you can complete the coursework along with this webinar that you're watching, and you will get a digital certificate sent to you by your email address. Okay, so if you'd like a certificate, that will be provided after you complete the course that accompanies our webinar today. So I'd like to introduce obviously our speakers for today, all right? And I'm very privileged to have them with us. I'll start first with our gentleman in the audience. He is a proud public school teacher. He's been teaching at Brunswick SC and the University of Melbourne Sessional Academy. And he's been teaching English, history as an additional language for the past 12 years. Recently, he's been named a top 50 finalist in the Varkey Foundation's Global Teacher Prize for 2021. He is a passionate teacher and he loves teacher collaboration, and he supports this through organizing teach meets and running #EduReading, an online academic reading group. He researches and publishes many articles about empowering teachers, about professional learning via social media, and engages teachers via research. Without further ado, I'm proud to welcome to the program Mr. Stephen Kolber. Stephen, glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's good to join. I'm excited to hear all the people joining us from all over the world. So, John Ripso to my Khmer colleagues, and hello to everyone else. You were much better with your hellos than me. That's the best I got.
You sound perfectly fine, Stephen. Thanks so much for that. We even have some people from Houston, Texas, from Abra, Philippines. Hi to everybody as well. This is great. We have a really wide and far-reaching audience with us today. And I'd like to introduce also our second speaker who will join us on the panel today. She is a certified teacher of the Italian language, and she teaches history and geography in secondary school, specializing in teaching, as I said, Italian the second language. She is also an Apple teacher, and she is an expert in flipped didactics and the use of technology in teaching. She holds training courses for teachers and collaborates with FlipNet, the first association in Italy, for promoting flipped didactics. And she is very much convinced of the potential of using technology in education. So it'd be fantastic to hear what she has to say about flipped classroom and using technology for that, as well as digital storytelling in her own classrooms and the implementation of European projects for quite a while now. She is part of the, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Indire Erasmus Plus, National Agency's network of experts, as an evaluator of the e-twinning projects, which is a European platform that allows students from European schools to connect and collaborate on projects. As part of her Erasmus ambassadorship, she is actively involved in spreading the use of the e-twinning platform as well for the European Union's Mobility Program for Education, Training, and Youth and Sports. And I hope which she's with us now on the AcadAsia network, we can connect with our European friends and educators from there. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Maria Rosaria Grasso. Maria, welcome.
Hi, welcome. It's very nice to be here with you. Sorry but I have had technical problems, but it seems now that everything is okay. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for your introduction, Roy. Hello to you, to Ivan. Nice to meet you all. Hello to all the participants that you've heard. They are from different parts of the world, I can say. So I think that, first of all, I want to think that you must forgive me because my English is not perfect. So, but I think it will be good enough to let people understand me. Thank you.
And that's perfectly fine. Thank you so much, Maria. If you are having some technical issues, if you'd like, just in case, you may probably want to also turn off your video once in a while. and at least we have your
Okay.
audio. So we'll see, because right now what I'm seeing is the connection is a little bit slow, but it's
Yeah.
perfectly fine at the moment. Just in case later, you can just join us
Okay.
via audio. And I'm looking at the comments. We have our friend, I know this teacher from the Philippines, Mr. Luis Carmelo Buenaventura. She's saying, "Ciao, Maria. Come stai?" So
Wow. Bene, grazie.
yeah, so it's I guess my Italian is not that fluent either. It's like a bellissima, bellissimo, something like that. All right.
Wow.
Okay, fantastic.
Sounds good.
Okay. So our topic today again is very interesting. So as I started at the top of the program, it's about flipped classroom, and in fact, this pedagogy approach is not that new. However, with the pandemic that we're coming out of the past 2 years, I think our educators from all over the world here now, especially in the Asian region, would kind of like to learn about your experiences, both of you, in terms of applying maybe the flipped classroom approach, maybe even during the pandemic or even before the pandemic, and see how that can probably help enhance learner engagement and learner activity and better learning outcomes. And I think it'll be interesting to hear your insights about this. So this is like a talk show, so it's very informal. We'll just give each other the chance to respond to the questions. And then towards the end of our session, we'll have a question and answer portion so that we can hear questions from the audience. So our beloved audience will be flashing our Mentimeter link. So just go to the link on Mentimeter online and type in the questions that you may have for our speakers today, so that we can have a lively discussion, and we'll answer those towards the end of our session. We have about probably 45 minutes for the next session today. All right, so I'll start first probably with our guide question, and we can see who likes to tackle this first. In your own words, I'd like to invite our panelists to kind of briefly describe, in summary, what makes the flipped classroom approach different from other pedagogies that are available, and what are the key elements of a flipped classroom? What are we talking about when we say flipped?
Right.
Anyone can start.
Well, may start.
Oh, I think Maria's connection is a bit choppy. I think, Maria, we lost you there for a minute. If you'd like to kind of switch to audio only, you can turn off your camera if you like. It might be easier. And I guess while we're trying to get Maria back, maybe Stephen, you kind of take a crack at it in the meantime. What are we talking about when you say flipped classroom? What are the elements of a flipped classroom?
Well, for me, it's an easy one, but obviously, if you're in the YouTube chat, John Bergman is here joining us online. He's the popularizer, the creator, the person who developed the flipped learning model. So we, pay all due
Hello,
respect to
John.
Yeah, very
Hi.
exciting. But
Exciting.
yeah, okay. My definition is basically you're using the class space, which is what we call it, the class space for human-to-human interaction. So in John's science classroom, it'd be a lot of experiments, a lot of hands-on activities. For me as an English and EAL teacher, it would be more conversations and more writing with direct feedback, as opposed to, me standing at the front delivering a PowerPoint or a lecture or those sort of things. So it's all about using the space that you have face-to-face with students to be as human, to be as democratic, and to be as present as you can be. And we use mostly technology to back that up with us.
Okay, that's interesting. So I guess what I'm hearing you saying is you're trying to use other techniques so that the learning is happening not just within the classroom, but you're trying to maximize the time you do have with them when you're face to face with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as all of us know as teachers, there's never enough time to cover all the things you need to cover. And if you're doing your job really well, there's a million other things that you could be bringing in, extension that you could be providing for your students, and different content that you could focus on. But to have them really learning to the best of their ability, they need the most human elements of you to be present. So, rather than 25 people, or in Australia, that's the numbers we tend to have, 25 up to 80 around the world, depending on where you're at. Instead of just having them sitting there being passive and consuming things as you say them, and then them never being able to go back to those things because they're spoken and then they disappear into the ether. It's all about using that space where you are with them to support them as best as you can. And if they want to do extra work, it's available, it's online, it's all those places are there.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned there about, there's not enough time, and probably the classroom size as well kind of affects it. If you have so many voices and trying to get the attention of so many learners in the room, it's kind of hard to get everyone's input and try to hear them all out. I mean, you can imagine, especially like in Philippines, the average classroom size is about 40 students, right?
Yeah.
Typically. So, even more evident is the need for different approaches so that you can kind of get more engagement and more activity from the learners. And if it's available outside the time that you're with them, that's probably even better, because then they can engage and kind of maximize the learning, not just being dependent solely on the face-to-face time that you have them.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll kind of circle back to that topic when Maria kind of stabilizes her connection. Okay, I think she's kind of logging in right now. Maybe you can give her a chance. Hi, Maria, you're back.
Oh, sorry. As I told you, I don't know why, but the connection is very bad today.
It's okay. It's fine,
Sorry.
Maria. No problem. I think your video's coming in much faster now, so that's good.
Okay, perfect.
So again, just to recap, the question is, how do you, in your own words, kind of define what the flipped classroom approach is? What makes it different from other pedagogies? What are the elements of the flipped classroom? And Stephen kind of pointed out earlier that Mr. John Bergman's actually in the chat here. He's actually present here, and he's the
I'm so
proprietor
excited.
yeah, and he kind of mentions here there are two spaces: independent space where students work alone. This is for the information transfer, and the lower blooms, and then the group space where active learning are higher blooms. Very interesting.
Yes, of course. Which is the best part, I think, of the activities, because of course the first part is just something for them to start to get in the let's say the argument. Okay, so it's the first exposure prior to class. Okay, so it can be very easy. So there is no reason to say, okay, I don't have any material, I don't have any video, I am not able to make a video. Okay, now it's worldwide spread, so there are a lot of there is a lot of materials. Okay, so either video, which is I think the best. I mean, I prefer the video as to give the students advance, but it can be anything actually. It can be some simple textbooks, okay, podcast, even podcast, any kind of things that can let students get in touch with the argument. So this is the main things. Okay, so they study at home, and when they are in class, then we have a lot of time to do group activities, to get students involved, to get the students go deeper in the argument and work on that.
Right. And I guess, just for clarity, when you mention argument, I guess you also mean it's the discussion, it's the discourse, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a combative approach. It's not really arguing a point. It's more the conversation, right? The discussion.
Yeah. Yes. Is the topics, let's say, the things that they have to study. Okay. And this can be also an incentive for students to be prepared for class, So
right. And that those, I guess, those elements make it different. Whereas in the traditional model, you would probably discuss the same lesson in the textbook in front of you, but here you give everything, whether it in a podcast form or reading material, or as you said,
Yeah.
video ahead of time. And then the expectation is the learners or the students will come to class having completed those readings and those
Yeah.
video watching before they come to class.
Exactly. In this way, you have more time to provide in-class activity that focus on higher level cognitive activities, of course.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Instead of
absolutely.
losing time to explain, to have a lecture, in class. So in this way, you have more time to focus on that higher level cognitive activities, of course, diploma activities.
And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I don't know if if your experience, maybe you can share more specific examples, especially during the pandemic. Probably there's some teachers or some other institutions that were not kind of practicing flipped classrooms so much, but essentially the pandemic kind of forced us to kind of do learning activities virtually, and that kind of introduced new technologies, um, but some would say that not necessarily also flipped, right? Because some educators probably thought that, okay, I can use video, let's say a synchronous video like we're having now, but my pedagogy approach is still similar as if I was repeating the lecture in front of a class. Whereas maybe some others, if they use flipped with these technologies, how would they use flipped how would they use flipped during the pandemic? I mean, can you share some specific approaches that you did when you couldn't see your students face to face?
Yes, well, actually, basically it's the same, but because, for example, during in the class time, let's say the class time, okay,
Mm.
I used to have, for example, even the breakout rooms to let students work in groups. Okay,
Mm.
so this was one of the solution. Okay, so the time that I spent in class was to let them basically not doing the same things, because of course it's not exactly the same.
Mm.
Because also, as no, I am having today, because sometimes we have bad connections, so there are a lot of more problems, of course, when we were online. We had online teaching because of the pandemic time, in the pandemic time, so it was much difficult, but anyway, you could do mostly the same things as you were in class. I think that the breakout rooms were fantastic in this way. Of course, it's something that's, how can I say, it is not the best probably, but
Mm.
we were able to do something. We were able to do something in this way. Okay, and also
Mm.
the technology, all the different maybe applications, to work, to let students work in teams, helped. Okay, helped me a lot. So with the use of
Absolutely.
technology, yes.
Stephen, can you chime in here also? I'd like to hear from you. How did you kind of do flip during the pandemic time?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing that I think of is just how much wasted human capital there was during remote learning. Like every teacher in Victoria, Australia, definitely were online, speaking to their students live, and I think probably if you looked at a percentage, like maybe 1% of teachers ever recorded anything that they did. So it was like it
Mm.
was right there to be captured, and it all more or less went to waste. So whether the students were paying attention or not, you could have I don't know. People were complaining in Australia, at least at various points. Oh, the students are too quiet. The students aren't interacting. Okay, great. Record it. Make it a video. They can watch it whenever they want when they're, going out doing things. But it's basically looking at the spaces that you have, and as John has space, maybe a social space, because often you just say, okay, you're with your friends, you've got 10 minutes, have a chat, catch up, be connected. And then there's the normal direct instruction stuff. So ideally that's happening via video beforehand. So then they can be in their groups interacting with one another. So yeah, it's kind of like the same 4 groups, but in a face-to-face classroom, all of those 4 spaces are happening at the same time, or depending on when the teacher decides who's doing what when. But yeah, I just think of all the wasted teaching that was done that wasn't recorded, wasn't made available for students after the fact or anything like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's a great shame, but in terms of me personally, and Maria's already said it, but getting them into groups as much as possible was the only way to get our students engaged and actually participating in things. So building in discussions, making sure everything was available so they could be prepared to take part in those discussions when we actually put them in place. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight, Stephen, because you're saying that, we were already all having video online. That could have been resources that have been recorded and used later as part of, flipped material for the flipped classroom. And as John is, pointing out here, those are resources that could have, made could have been made available to struggling students who probably could not attend the class or be in the lesson. And that's probably something that we can take off as a learning from, if we are doing, even as we're coming back to face, to take opportunity, take advantage of these video recordings, to use that as material for future classes later. I think that's a great insight. I also like what you mentioned about the group work. Whereas before it used to be just separate groups in the face-to-face, but now with breakout rooms, as Maria mentioned, you're able to do it virtually, right? So the breakout sessions on individual group and teams that allows them to continue the flipped classroom or the flipped learning work, even if it's virtual. So I think that's a great insight that has been done during the pandemic, and probably something that can be continued after the pandemic. What do you think? Do you think that as we're returning relatively back to a new normal, um, how do you see flipped learning or flipped classroom changing now that more institutions have been exposed to all these methods and technologies like podcasting, video, and what have you?
Hopefully it's easier, right?
Well,
Mm,
yeah, well, I think that thanks to the pandemic, I think now more people know the flipped classroom methodologies.
mm,
A lot of people use technology, okay, that which they didn't use it before. So I think this can be a very good thing. Probably, but I think that from one side is okay. From the other side, I think that most people need to be more prepared about what is flipped
mm,
classroom and about
mm,
what does it mean, because it's not only matters of giving them a video or material before and then going back to class and do the regular lesson, regular activity. Is something
mm,
completely different. So from one side, it has been good that thanks to the pandemic, the flip methodologies more used has been more used, but not always in the say in the right way. I think that people
mm,
must be more trained about it, because they think that it's easy. It's just matter of switch, but it's not.
yeah, I appreciate that, Maria, because it sounds easy, but it actually needs more preparation. It actually
Exactly.
needs more work. And I'll share a post here from one of our people in the chat, Joanne Ray. I'll try to explain the context of this joke. It's a little bit of a funny thing because she's saying Joanne Ray's saying she's agreeing with John. They flicked back and forth with their teachers. This is Negros, an island of the Philippines. Sometimes they also do backflipping. Okay, so the joke there is doing flipped is not so easy. You kind of have to do some backflips just so that you can actually have a successful
Yeah.
flipped class. Would you agree, Stephen? Is that it's more than just video and all these online materials, right?
Yeah, I mean, and like I've said before, John's way ahead of all of us in this. But for me, like, for the last six years, I've been saying, okay, you can make your own video, you can make instructional video, you can make these resources for your students. And it's like during lockdowns, remote learning, emergency teaching, whatever we want to call it, everyone realized, okay, we can make our own videos, which used to be the whole PD. Here's how to make a video. It used to be quite difficult. You need to have certain software, certain equipment, whatever. Now, it's like open PowerPoint, go to record, click record, or something as simple as that. So you can do it in 3 seconds. But 6 years ago, it wasn't that way. It was much more difficult. So as John said, everyone can make videos, but not many people know how to flip well. So you need to have a justification. Like, you will have more time. You will sacrifice some time making the video, but you will have more time in class with your students. And you have to kind of have a clear vision for what are we going to do with that time? Because if you're just giving videos for homework, you might as well give them a textbook. It's the same thing. But what are you actually going to use that time for? And that's I think for every teacher, that's a question you have to ask yourself and think, for me in my setting with my students at this age level or this content matter, what works best and how does it sort of fit into your view of teaching, your view of the world? So that's where it gets really interesting and really exciting, how you can use the technology to make you more human, more present, and all those sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, it's one thing, even assuming you're able to kind of have all the material, presented beforehand, whether it's you're using an online learning management system, a podcast, a video recording, and then that's a great question to ask. And that's part of the elements of flip learning and flip teaching that they have to consider is that, okay, now that you have more time, what are you actually going to do in the class? Right? What are you going to have the students actually do to achieve the learning outcomes if you're giving them a lot of pre-work or work ahead of time? It's not the usual homework or seat work after the class. It's having these things before the class. But then if assuming the learners really did their work ahead of time, what are you having them do during the class? And I think that's one of the key elements of the flipped method.
And I would just say, like, that's what makes the research into flipped learning interesting and a little bit more complicated than most, because if 10 people are doing flipped learning, the question of what they're doing with that time is different. And in that time, it might be an effective thing or an ineffective thing or something that's fun but not that good for developing knowledge in your students. And so, yeah, it's really drawing the line between how we leverage those technologies. And that's why the research is tricky. But anyway.
Right. So it sounds great, but there has to kind of be, more preparation done. And depending on how the research shows, so then that kind of skews the research as well. If it's not done well, you probably get, not the best results you think. And then you say, oh, flip doesn't work because, the results of this study, whatever, are not showing the, let's say, higher passing grades, higher assessment scores. But maybe you also look back at how you did the flipped, right? How was it conducted so that you can actually get those outcomes correctly? And I know Maria said we need some more training and more expertise experience. I also saw John mention that sometimes it's also not about training per se, but just basically asking the right questions and building the right lesson plan for flipped.
Yeah, for sure.
And this leads, I guess, to some of the challenges, right? Because so flip sounds great, and the outcomes, what are the kind of, let's say, maybe you can share what positive, results have happened, maybe in your own practice, in doing successful flipped activities with your learners. What are the good things that have happened with your learners when you actually did a successful flip classroom?
See, for me, it's good discussion, basically. If I'm an English teacher, so we have exams. They're all written exams. All of my students have always been able to write well because that's what we do 80% of the time. So if you were to follow my class all the way through the years, my students come out knowing how to write an essay really well. But then, unfortunately, they have to go into the world and in the world they will talk to people. And if I think of my practice, 5-6 years ago, that's all they would know. They wouldn't have had a discussion. They wouldn't have known how to collaborate properly. They wouldn't have known how to ask, how to politely disagree with someone and have those kind of, well, that's interesting, but have you considered the kind of phrases? They would have just gone, I don't know, here's the answer and that's it. But it's getting them to actually have those social interactions and have the ability to kind of set their own goals. Like that's one of the main things that flipped learning allows. Students can say, if they really want to do something, there's extra things they can do. There's other people they can go and watch, go and view, go and learn from, rather than just me, the one teacher that they're stuck with in the room. So it's empowering the students to be actually democratic citizens, take part in discussion and be real humans, and also be able to set goals that they might be able to follow through on in their sort of later learning. How about you, Maria?
Yeah, that's great, Stephen. Just before I get Maria's comment, so what I hear you saying is the social discussion and discourse, being able to kind of, civilly argue and discuss points. And two is, other sources of facts and information, not solely dependent on, just the teacher, for the learners to investigate for themselves, right? Very interesting points, benefits of flipped classroom. Maria, any other? What did you see in your learners?
I totally agree with. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I totally agree with Stephen, because also for me, I think I think the best part is for students that they learn to work together, so social competencies. Because they are not used. Okay, I teach in a middle school. Okay, so but I think Stephen is in a high school, right? Stephen, you teach in a high school. It's in the middle school. They really are not used usually to work together. Okay, it's quite difficult for them. So at the beginning of when they arrive, in my first class, usually I spend a lot of time just to work on that. And most of the part of the flipped activity is basically all the part of the all the flipped activities are cooperative work. Okay, cooperative activity. And what do they do usually? They learn how to do research, how to work together, how to go deeply in the argument. Because of course, when I used to give them a video or the material in advance, is not complete. I mean, I cannot give them a video that is 15 minutes long. They will not watch it. Okay, so the video must be short, must just let students enter in the topic, in the argument. Then in class they will work on it. They will research together in groups, okay, to prepare something. So it's a collaborative work, and they have how can I say? They have something to do at the end. So they have to produce something. At the end, this activity, usually there is a product, any kind of product. It can be a presentation, it can be a video, it can be an essay, it can be anything, but they must produce something. Okay, so basically they have a problem to investigate, to work on it, to solve, and then to produce something to explain to others. Okay, because this is, I think, also one of the most important part, that not only they have to work on in the activity on the activity that I have prepared, but to show the results to the other, so to share, okay, what their results to others. So we need time. That's why it's good that, with the flip system, some part is done at home, some of the work is done at home, because we need time in class. It takes time to do all this activity. activity.
Right, right. And I guess that also goes back to what Stephen was mentioning is once you have, you know, let's say shorter videos, digestible material that the learners can engage with at the start before the class, and then all the group work, social activities, group work happens during the class. And that's how you kind of fill the time in terms of getting them to interact and engage, whether it's a virtual breakout room or a physical, grouping in the classroom, right? And I think that's a great insight on the approaches on what they can actually do. And I'm glad to hear in the chat a lot of comments on, they find it very insightful, very interesting. Obviously, John has some great comments here. If you're talking about particular verticals of learning or specific subject matter expertise in areas, then whatever topic or subject matter you're doing, specific flipped activities and actual work being done in class or in groups with the pre-reading ahead of time for these topics. So just go ahead and view the chat, everybody. And I think all our educators are really finding the discussion super insightful. The time is flying by so fast, and you already have so many questions. So I'm just going to try to kind of move in now to the question and answer portion so that we have enough time to ask and answer, respond to these very insightful questions. I think there was one question I saw earlier related to you're teaching middle school or higher or senior high school. Can flipped learning be done for lower levels for younger kids? Is it possible to do flipped for them, or it's a little bit needs to be calibrated a little bit?
No, I mean, I used to do in the middle school. I think it can be done even earlier.
Hmm.
Yeah, why
But I
not?
guess maybe can you cite just a simple example, Maria? How would you let's say kinder prep, grade 1, grade 2? What's an example of a flipped scenario for them?
Okay, well, probably in the very low classes, you need the help of the parents. Okay,
The parents.
for the
Hmm.
for the parents, yes, for the little one, because of course they are not able, to um, or at least they have to learn how to use the technologies,
Hmm.
and maybe they don't know how to write, but you can give them, like a podcast or something like that. You can send them something to listen.
Hmm.
Anyway, I think it's possible. It is possible to do it. I mean, I have
Right.
friends that do it in the elementary school. Um,
Hmm.
so you find a way. I mean, if you really think that the methodology is good, you find a way. They
Right.
find a way, really. Maybe with some short videos.
Hmm.
As I tell you, you need, of course, maybe at the beginning the help of the parents, at least
Right.
for the first grades. But then, when the little students get used to it, they can do it even by themselves.
Yeah, I've seen some younger teachers in Philippines. What they do is they kind of record themselves reading storybooks or children's books. So even if it's simple, let's say alphabet or simple stories, and that they watch it first and then they talk about it when they have their virtual session. So why is A an apple? Why is B a boy or a C is a
Yeah,
cat? Yeah. So that's one of the examples I've seen of a flipped approach for younger learners. Um, okay, there's so many questions here. I'm just trying to organize them. There's one question here: is giving guide questions on the independent part of the flipped classroom pedagogy necessary? I hope I understand this question. So I guess there's a portion of flip where it's independent. Do you need to give guide questions for any pre-material you're giving the learners?
well, I don't know, Stephen. Maybe I'm curious about your answer. I used to give them some guided question. Yes. Also, it help the students to to stay focused on what they are listening or they are watching, and even because for sure I haven't read the questions, but for sure people usually ask me, but how do you know if students have watched the video, have do this is one of the system, the method. Okay, I give them a little things to do. Okay, for example, just answer 3 or 4 questions, or maybe prepare a very easy or quickly map of the things that they watched. A little something, not too much, but a little something that let them to stay focused on what they are watching or they are listening.
Right.
And I think they are good. In my experience, at least, I think that they are good.
Right. That makes sense. Just give them a little bit, not too much, right?
So
And then just to focus their attention. Stephen, do you have similar experiences to this?
I wouldn't say it's necessary, but you need to be assessing in some way. And I think the most important thing to do is for it to be different. So if you gave a video every time and it had, each time 4 questions, students would get bored. They'd get sick of the same old, same old. Maybe you might teach them Cornell note taking, or you might say, we're going to have a discussion and I want to hear you using these words. Like, if you're teaching them how to, fix a washing machine, you don't need them to answer questions. You need them to do the thing that you want them to do. So sometimes questions are good for obviously written and languages and English and, whatever it is, whatever language you're teaching, it's important to have questions and for them to learn that skill. But there's 100, as many ways as you can think of to assess. So as long as you're mixing it up, then anything can work, I guess.
I teach also history and geography. That's why, for me, maybe the questions are, or maybe the map, making a map of the main points. It's helpful,
Yeah, so that's interesting, Maria. You can vary the activity where it's not always just question writing. So make a map of, let's say, Italy, right? During, let's say, whatever historical events are happening there, and maybe the borders change or the towns become cities and states and what have you. Yeah, so at least it's not necessarily a written question, but they make a map of the histories, right? They can do that. So make it a bit more varied. So that's a nice tip there. I'm going to group a bunch of questions here, and this all related to basically what happens if the learner is not receptive to this approach, right? So some may say how. So the bunch of questions here are kind of related. Some of them are talking about how can you assure the students actually do the preparation work before the class? What happens if they're not participating on the first exposure, the first stage? How do you get the quieter students to kind of also participate in the group work? So what's happening when some of the learners are not engaging well?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I can say that because, of course, you must consider that not all the students watch. Okay, I mean, it's something that it's normal. I think it's pretty normal. I can say what I do usually. I think maybe Stephen or a lot of people do, because when I go back, when I go in class, okay, the first activity is usually to recall, okay, and see, maybe in a funny way, because my students are young, maybe with a Kahoot, with a game, okay, make some questions to see if they have watched, if they have learned. And it's a good way for me to see. Kahoot is fantastic for this, because I can see how many know that point, and I can stop and discuss, create a discussion about that point. So usually are the other students that say the things that help the others. This is a good way to let's say, let the students that didn't watch the material, didn't listen, didn't read the material, to be in the argument, in the topic, so they can participate in some way.
Okay. Yeah, good insights there using Kahoot or some other tools to kind of get the more quiet ones to participate. Stephen, what's your experience on this?
Oh, well, I'm interested to pick up the homework idea because I think if you think of traditional homework, the students do homework, and then a week later, a month later, you mark it, and then that's the end of the homework. But if you're doing a flipped, if you're thinking of the homework as happening before the class, there is at least a social pressure, and there's a chance that they'll be, you know, that they'll miss something or they'll seem like they're not aware of what they should be aware of. So I don't know. That I think that's part of it. Like the quiet students will know confidently that they know their content before the class starts. The
Mm,
students that haven't will have some sort of a social pressure of everyone else saying, did you do this? Did you do that? But if you think of the way homework is normally done, like students are never, did you do your homework? Like in my experience, I've never heard students say that. Whereas, people will be saying, we're about to have a discussion on the article. Did you read the article? Like that could potentially be an awkward or uncomfortable experience for the students sitting there not knowing what's the topic, what's the article, what did it say. That's going to be difficult for them. But if they don't hand in homework, what happens? Maybe in a month's time, when you mark it, it's missing, and they get a detention or something. Like that's not how a
okay.
student, not how a young person's brain thinks. Delayed gratification. In a month's time, something bad might happen. That's not how it works. But beforehand is a lot more effective.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's like, if you're using, let's say, carrot or stick approaches, you get benefits or punishments or what have you, or let's say
Mm,
social pressure. Maybe if you're starting flipped for the first time with let's assume it's a very new practice. You
mm,
started at the start of the school year. Maybe you need some time to get used to it, kind of orient the quieter students. So this is how we're going to do things from now on. I'm going to be asking you, did you do the assignment? Or there's a group work that needs to be presented as a team. If they don't pull their weight, then their whole team suffers. There might be some way to get the more unreceptive or yeah, uncooperative students to kind of pitch in with the group, right? So
mm.
it's probably just reframing the work so that you can get them to participate in the activities.
And I think it's also useful sometimes to make videos for the parents at the start of the year. Like if you're
Mm,
the only person flipping in your school, parents might be thinking, oh, why are they doing things differently in that class down there? Why is that
mm,
teacher different? So you can send them a video. This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is why I'm doing this. I think your child will benefit in this way. Then you can do a sort of bridge a lot of those problems before they happen rather than wait till the first time you meet them for like a parent teacher conference or something, and they say, I disagree with this style or whatever. They've met you, they've seen a video of you, they've seen you explaining and hopefully being excited about the idea. I think that can do a lot of the work early, and
that's a great insight,
obviously
Stephen,
shown it.
because yeah, that's a great insight because sometimes, there's so a lot of questions have been answered by that example. Because does it mean that I have to wait for the entire faculty or school to kind of do flipped? Probably not. Yeah, as long as you're able to achieve the learning outcome, you can, as an individual educator, you can do flipped, and then you can prepare the parents. And this is who I am. It's perfect. You put your video introducing yourself on the online platform. It's for the parents. This is my teaching style. This is how I do, and I think it'll benefit your sons and daughters. Yeah, that's a great proactive approach to introducing flipped at the beginning.
And just to jump on what Maria said earlier, for the younger students, like parents are always thinking, how can my student needs to do homework, but I don't know what it is. If you've made a
Mm,
short little video, how to write capital letters, how to hold a pen, then the student's parent can sit down with them and say, okay, Mr. or Miss, whoever, so-and-so is going to teach us this and we're going to do it together. Like, I don't know. I think that's an exciting possibility that something you've made could be bringing their family closer together and getting them to do the learning together. That would be flip learning at its best, I think.
yeah, absolutely. Maria, do you have some insights to share on this as well?
Sorry?
Do you have any comments about this? How do you get the introducing flipped? Let's say it's something new in my school, or my
Yeah.
parents have not done flipped before. How do you introduce it to the learners and the parents?
Yes, yes. It's not well now. Maybe now they know it. Okay, it's because a lot of teachers now use flipped learning, but at the beginning, I used to introduce to parents, and I used also to do to give students a questionnaire at the beginning, at the end. At the beginning, because I wanted to know which way was their favorite way to learn, through video, through text, through audio. For me, just to know better. At the end, to see how effective was the methodologies. And I can tell you that they prefer most of them prefer the videos, and all of them were happy with the new methodologies because, of course, for them it's easier to learn. They work in group, and they love to work in groups, so they are more motivated. It's funnier for them. It seems like they are not working, they are not learning. So it's very effective.
Yeah, that's amazing. How do you make it feel not like work, like they're just having fun with their classmates or their peers, right? I think that's one of the other benefits if you do kind of a flipped lesson well. There's another question here in the chat. Do you have any recommendations to avoid having the videos or pre-assigned materials to spoil the discovery and creation of meaning in class? So I guess this goes to the composition of the material ahead of time. How do you avoid it so that it doesn't spoil the discovery of the lesson when they come in class?
Okay, talking for my experience, it's it's impossible. I mean, to spoil, because when the material that I give them is the basis. I mean, then in class they have to explore. So I mean, I cannot see the risk. You know what I mean? I cannot see this risk, at least in my experience. So I cannot.
Stephen, you have any insights on this? Does giving the material ahead of time sometimes kind of spoil the lesson, or okay, I've already read this, then the activity doesn't have as much meaning?
Yeah, I'm the same as Maria. I can't picture it. Like, I've never thought, oh, that's enough knowledge, I'm finished. Or it's just like, I don't know. I think if your class is working well, like Maria said, the content you're giving them is the basis, the foundation, the whatever, and then they can from there apply it to 100 different things. So it's not that you're spoiling it, it's that you're hopefully giving students mastery over the subject, so they can say, okay, I understand this, now I can go from this basis and I can extend myself, I can go into new areas. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that's a maths thing or something that you can spoil it before you do it, but I can't imagine any context where it might work. I don't know.
I understand. I guess it also comes to the instructional design of the lesson. So just because you're giving them the information ahead of time doesn't mean the learning is just that. Then you craft the activities when you do have them, engaged, to kind of discover, okay, what's this for? Why is this, so whether it's a math equation or, the history of what have you. So these are the facts, but what are the insights that you can get based on these facts, and craft an activity around that? I think that'll make the in class or the group work much more meaningful. And I guess if it's crafted properly, it actually allows you to make the lesson stick in the minds of the learner, because sometimes they just read and they forget, right? I think one of the goals with Flip would be the experience you have when you're with them, the activity you have with them should kind of crystallize and make it memorable. What do you think?
Of course, that's why that's the reason why the things must be even practical things. I mean, they have to produce something. They they must be involved in, of course, maybe making a research, go deeper in the argument, okay? But then they have to produce something, just to to get them involved in the higher level thinking, um, and creativity. Uh, uh, so they to produce something new, let's say something new. Okay. Basically, this is the main part, you know, of the flip methodologies, I think.
Right, right. Okay, we have some basic questions here, and maybe you can give some insights and examples of how you actually do flipped in your own, classes. So, for example, there's one clear question here. It's like, without the typical lecture, what do you exactly have the students do during class time, right? Because the presumption of flipped is you're not just reading the textbook out to them during the class. You have them read the material ahead of time. So, what are examples of what you actually have them do in class, for example? And you can take any topic that you're most familiar with, just as an example.
So for me, and this is just from this morning today, so it's fresh in my mind. The
Okay.
students all watched a video about the author that we're studying and the history, where they grew up, where they went to school, what their interests were, and how those fed into the book. So everyone had that knowledge already. And we spent probably 40, 50 minutes in the class discussing the ethical ramifications of the book. So it's about cloning. And so I was saying to the students, is eating meat ethical? Is organ donor, organ transplanting, is that ethical? Would you rather know where it came from, like, and how they're similar? So we were kind of doing big thinking. If they had a child, would they rather them only read this book or the movie that we're watching? Like, so getting those real, like, actually getting them to put themselves in the shoes of the story and think, how does this relate and how do the ethics play into it? So rather than just, we know the book, we know the author, we did that out of class, so that in class we could do the really big picture thinking and get them to be thinking about how it all fits into their worldview and their developing personalities and things.
That's a great example. Maria, how about you?
Okay, for example, when I teach Italian, but even when I teach history or geography, it depends. Or maybe something related, maybe to things that just happened. For example, I use the debate, debating. So they have to analyze the problem, to get deeper in the problem, and then to have the debate in group, of course. Okay, so it's a group work. Or maybe they have to, for example, maybe in history, in geography, when I give them a topic, they, through a group work, they have to, I don't know, for is one of the things that I used to do often with students. Maybe they have to study, to study or to work on different countries, following, for example, the river. Okay, I don't know, the Danubio River. So all the countries that they have to, all the the capital city that the Danubio cross. Okay, so we had to make, for example, you had to make a trip on the Danubio. So let's organize this trip. So I give some instruction. So first, maybe I gave them some material at home, just to let them know something about where is it, which are maybe the countries or some. But then is at school that they have to prepare the activity, to do the activity, to prepare the activity, to show the activity to the other groups.
Right. So it's like, instead of making it just something they read about in a textbook paper, try to make it real and relevant. Let's take a trip So if you were to visit this place, what would it be like? What are the people like? What is the surroundings like?
Yes, how's the weather? If you
Mm,
want to go. So what kind of clothes do you have to take with you, or
right.
something more? And they have to go deeper. They have to investigate.
There's another question here that we see is in terms of assessments. How do you how do you actually have more? How do you actually grade or rate the pre-work versus the group work? Right? Because I think there's some questions here in the chat. They're asking, sometimes the students they don't have enough discipline. They're not actually doing the pre-work. Is one way to motivate them to actually do the work ahead of time, adding more grade weight, or do you have more grade weight towards the actual face-to-face group work? I mean, how do you kind of weight the assessments for the pre-work and the in-class work or in group work?
Um, okay, may I start, Steven?
Yeah, please.
Well, I evaluate all the process. Okay, so
Hmm.
of course the main part is the product, the final part, that the production, let's say. Okay, the
Hmm.
students, they explain, or the product to the class, but also, and they know also, if they didn't watch the material that I give them in advance. And also it is a part of the
Hmm.
final assessment. Okay, it's only
Hmm.
a part. It
Hmm.
actually is not the biggest one,
Hmm.
because I prefer to assess how do they work in class, how they are active in the group, how they are involved, and what they produce. Okay, so basically, it's I evaluate everything, but the first part is the one that I evaluate less.
Right, right. And you just have some sort of quick assessment, whether it's one or two questions that they have to fill in, and that's probably a smaller portion of the grade versus the output, which is really the bulk of the grade.
Yes, because if they work well in class, I mean, it's not that a problem. Okay,
Yes, yes.
I don't care if they didn't watch at home, maybe because didn't have time or whatever. So it's okay for me if they work well, if they explain well, if they make a good product, okay, to
Mm,
show the rest of the class, if they're able to make a good exposition, oral exposition, okay, of the what they have done. For me, it's okay.
mm.
It's fine.
How about, thank you, Maria. How about you, Stephen? What do you think?
For me, like my answer is not really an answer. Whatever my school says, the policy says this much, this much is on that. I say that's how much, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, maybe that's an Australian specific thing, but like we're very rule bound by what's worth what and when and how and etc. Maybe if I was in France or somewhere more open, I would be able to set those and make choices. But basically, the school and the policy says this, so I just match what's required of me and try and be as interesting and engaging as I can through my pedagogy to kind of work around the system whilst also being within the system.
That's a practical response. I mean, it really depends. Like, but in your school, let's say, or where you are now, Stephen, is it like 20% pre-work, 80% output, or something like that, or nothing that
Or
specific?
let me think. It's like basically the expectation is the pre-work or the whatever, however you do it, needs to be done, like ticked off to get
Hmm.
a pass, and everything else is on the end of assessment. So
Okay. Okay.
it's kind of up to me to emphasize the pre-work and how that would then, of course, lead into the final assessment. So that's the
Right.
work I do rather than making up new systems or approaches. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like it's not about putting a number value to that pre-work. It's more like as long as they tick the box, because they
Mm.
kind of have to do that, and that to Maria's point, is if the output is satisfactory and they achieve the outcome, then that's the grade, right? So I guess the advice for our educators here in the audience is probably not to get too caught up with the actual numerical assessments. If your institution or school allows you that flexibility, it's really more about the learning outcome. And if the approach of flipped allows you to reach that outcome, then the grade reflects that, right? And not necessarily, not to be too stuck on the mechanics or the each step and grade. Just look at it also in an overall setting. As long as the student is doing the work, then I think that's good enough.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. So there are a couple other questions here. I guess I just want to circle back now. We've kind of touched on most of these briefly, but maybe some of the teachers in the audience are having issues about, you say, the challenges of flip. Let's say we talked about lack of student discipline already, but maybe is lack of teaching resources an issue? Lack of equipment or devices? Let's say if I want to do all these fancy tech tools, is that a factor? Will I not be able to do flip if I don't have easy access to video or podcasts? Or is there another way to still do flip despite not having all the resources available to me? Because not all institutions, of course, it varies, right? Some of them may not have as many resources as other schools. So how do they do flip if they feel they're under resourced?
I think every teacher thinks they're under resourced. Like, I guess
Right.
here in Australia, there would always be more money, more time, more everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done a lot of work in Cambodia, and like there are some teachers in Cambodia with better equipment than me because they've gone and sorted out and they've done the extra work. But the technology isn't the focus. The video isn't the focus. It's all about teachers doing what they do best, which is teaching the students face to face in the room, in the space, and anything we can do through flipped learning to make that more engaging and make attendance higher and those sort of things. In some locales, that's important, and that's the main sort of requirement: getting students into the room. So as long as you have pens and pencils, or pencils and paper, you've got enough to do flipped classroom. The important thing is teaching well once you've done it. And
I guess if we're doing hybrid, I guess as long as they're logging in, they're doing the online lesson. If they're able to attend, let's say your whatever 20-minute synchronous session, that is the getting them in the room, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you, Maria?
Yeah. I totally agree with Stephen. Absolutely, it's not matter of technologies. Of course, it helps for sure, but it's not matter of technologies. So
right.
You can flip your class even without technologies. You can find a way. And it's not enough for students to have all the
gadgets or
or maybe the iPad, or it's enough even a phone.
Phone is enough.
And now all of the students have smartphone. Okay,
right.
You cannot find students without smartphone, and it's not enough that each of them has one, because they work in group. So it's matter of wanted to do flipped classroom.
Yeah, I think you said it well, Maria. It's the mindset, right? It's the outlook. If the teacher is able to be creative and create a interesting flipped or learning environment, with whatever you have, it can still be successful. It's not dependent on so whatever gadgets or what have you. It's really how the you've designed it given what's available. This was an interesting discussion, and I've really been very insightful and very inspiring. Before I wrap up, I probably would like to give the floor to both of you. Maybe you can share your final thoughts about flipped classroom. Maybe you can leave some inspirational messages to some of our teachers who are already doing flipped, or perhaps just starting with flipped or trying to learn more about it. What are your final thoughts that you can share with our audience today? Before I wrap up the session, and any parting words to kind of encourage our audience about flipped classroom?
what I just can say, let's start. Okay,
Hmm.
let's try. Let's give a possibility at this
Hmm.
approach, because once you try it, you know, you will uh, you will like it, and so I think really give it a try. And let's start. Maybe you don't have to start with all the. Even me sometimes, I don't do everything, but let's start maybe with one module, okay, one or two. Don't pretend to flip all your course,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
impossible. Start, okay, let's try. So this is my advice, okay, try with one one topic, one activity, and then you will see.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great words of encouragement. Just try it for just one module. Just give it a shot, right? Yeah, great. Stephen.
Yeah, I'll just say, yeah, it doesn't even require you to make anything or make a video. Find someone else's video, write some questions for it, plan an activity that's interesting, start with what's already there. And yeah, if you think, if you've ever thought teaching's boring, then flipped learning is the solution for it being boring, because you'll be doing things that previously, once a year when all the work's finished, we have a discussion. Once a year when all the work's finished, oh, we might do a practical activity. Once a year we'll do a inquiry. But all of a sudden you'll have enough time, you'll have enough space to try all those things that you've read about or you've seen. Seen some really old teachers are doing exciting things, but you've thought, oh, I don't have any time for that. This is the possibility to explore those things.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And who knows? Our educators here. You might just surprise yourself, right? What you thought was, a subject you knew back to front. You've been teaching it for several years to decades, and you think there's no other way to teach it. Maybe flipped will show you a different side that will be very interesting and very engaging, and your learners might actually, enjoy it even more. So, Stephen, Maria, thank you so much for your time. If you would like to stay back after we end the session, I'd really appreciate that. And also, we'd also be sharing with you, I guess, your own accounts to the Acadesia platform. So we'll be sharing that with you after the session, so you can. I think a lot of our educators here would like to engage with you more. So I think they'd be very happy and appreciative to kind of chat with you on Acadesia. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly, before I wrap things up, just share my screen to advise everybody, all our audience, how do you kind of access the course that accompanies our insightful lesson and webinar for today. So if I'll just share my screen one moment. Okay, so when you come to Acadesia, remember, go to acadesia.com and you just sign in if you already have an existing account. Or if not, don't forget to sign up and make sure you select the teacher option. Okay, just fill up a simple username password to have you. And when you complete the sign up, you'll gain access to our platform. And here in Collab Ed, we'll invite Maria and Stephen. If you want to chat with them, you can actually discuss here. Flipping your classroom, does it work? I hope that today we've convinced you that is actually, even just try it once, you probably will be pleasantly surprised on how more interesting and much more learning will be derived by your learners. And then within this platform, you go to Skilled or Skilled, and you'll be able to access the course that accompanies our lesson today. So we have a course here, Flipping Your Classroom, Does It Work? So once you create your account, make sure to enroll in this course. And then once you enroll in this course, complete all the lessons that you've seen. This includes the reflection, video reflection, exit survey. And once you've completed all these topics, then by email, you will receive your digital certificate on the blockchain. This uses our technology that allows you to have a tamper-proof version of your certificate. And this is actually something that you present on your LinkedIn accounts and what have you to see that you have actually completed the session, the CPD session with Acadesia for Flipping Classroom as an introduction. And then further down, who knows, we can actually probably offer more courses about this. So please do sign up and finish the course so you can get your certificate that accompanies our session for today. And of course, don't forget, next time we have our next session, also next week, something on Technology Tuesday. So we'll be showing more flipped activities. So catch you all next week. Stephen and Maria, it's been a pleasure. This is really fascinating. And I hope it encourages more people, more educators here to try flipped and not to be afraid. You have your community here, Acad friends. We have John here also in the audience to encourage you to try the flipped approach and make education and learning much more fruitful and much more fun for your learners. Okay, Stephen, Maria, thank you so much. On
Thank
behalf of
you.
Acad it's such a pleasure having you. And to all our friends, thank you, everybody, and see you next week. Okay, bye bye, everybody. Thank
Bye
you. Take
bye.
care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.